Opening credits. Ava and Carol Detective Agency. The Mystery of Solomon's Ring. Chapter 2. Captured.
"Wow!"
exclaimed Carol as they left the hotel. The huge, crystal-clear glass doors swooshed closed behind them.
"It looks even prettier at night."
"You're right," Ava agreed. It was quiet outside, but the lights from across the river shone brightly, the water acting as a mirror against the city and the night sky. The street lights were tall and ornate, looking like what Carol thought old-fashioned oil lanterns would look like. Carol inhaled sharply, the fresh air totally different than the hotel's air. It carried the scent of the city, traces of spiced cologne, cigarettes, and freshly made Italian food. "See?" said Ava, completely obliterating the magical moment. "The river's right there. We'll be totally fine."
All right,
Carol said, groaning good-naturedly. Ava offered her arm.
"M'lady, would you care to join me on a stroll to the other side of the street? A mini-tour of what I like to call the sparkling jewel of Italy, Florence."
Carol giggled and wrinkled her nose.
"Why are you talking in a British accent? We're in Italy, you nut."
"I'll catch on to the Italian accent later," Ava said, knocking her shoulder against her friend. Carol took her arm, knocking her back.
"At least the road's deserted,"
Carol supplied, as they looked both ways anyway, just in case. They strode to the river, breaking away from each other at the last second to rush to the cement wall and peer over it. The cool air hit their faces as they watched the river, its dark waters rippling lightly in the breeze. It stretched beyond what they could see, and they drank in the sight of it.
"Beautiful,"
whispered Carol, eyes wide.
"This is so cool."
Ava nodded in agreement, looking down into the inky black water of the Arno River. "I wonder if it's filled with sharks. Italian sharks, maybe?"
"I'm sure. And probably mermaids. This is the perfect time of the year for mermaid sightings."
Ava laughed with her friend. "What do you think is going on with that guy?" asked Ava, pointing toward a man who was leaning over the railing of a small bridge that connected to the other side of the river.
"Don't know,"
shrugged Carol.
"Maybe he's looking for a mermaid. Or maybe he's a merman."
Ava squinted her eyes. A pale yellow light washed over the man, making his bald head glow eerily like a miniature moon. Tiny wisps of white hair danced on his head in the cool breeze. There was something peculiar about the old man. As he stretched his hand out over the water, a quick succession of light flashed from his outstretched hand. The man hesitated for a few moments, and then the series of flashes began again. The man's head swiveled left and right as he took in his surroundings. The girls quickly crouched below the wall.
"Why are we ducking?"
whispered Carol.
"I don't know,"
said Ava, shaking her head.
"Maybe because he's acting weird, and if he sees us, he might stop whatever he's up to."
Carol nodded, agreeing. The girls slowly slid upward, their eyes just above the top of the stone wall.
"Ava, look at that,"
Carol whispered, pointing at the water. Ava followed Carol's finger and saw a sleek black vessel approaching in the water, headed toward the bridge. It almost blended in, like it was a part of the Arno River. Small bursts of light, mimicking the same flashes the old man had made, came from the front of the speedboat. Someone was responding to the old man with the same pattern of flashes. He glanced around anxiously again, and the girls dropped again behind the stone wall.
"What the heck is going on?"
whispered Ava. A large, ominous shadow passed over the girls. Ava was about to peek over the wall when Carol grabbed her shoulder, pulling her down beside her, putting a finger to her lips. The girls watched as a sleek black car, headlights off, quietly hissed by.
"Electric,"
whispered Carol, seeing the confused look in Ava's eyes. The girls watched as the car stealthily passed by as quiet as a ghost. The old man seemed completely oblivious to the impending doom until its shadow consumed him. The girls gasped as two men leapt from the car. The two men forcefully seized the old man, and one of the men pulled a black hood over the man's head. Carol grabbed Ava's hand and squeezed it, digging her nails into her palm. The old man screamed angrily, lashing out with his fists and feet with the ferocity of a tiger. But he was no match for the attackers, and they pushed and shoved him into the rear of the car. Ava and Carol stood, paralyzed. Everything seemed to be going in slow motion. With expert precision, the driver reversed the car right back onto the Longarno-Amerigo Vespucci highway, heading the opposite way from where it had come. Away from Ava and Carol. Carol couldn't decide if she was more terrified for the old man or relieved that they were going away. Before she could decide, though, a small pastry truck darted out from a small alley just a little way down the road. The men's sleek car careened to the right to avoid the truck and swung out of the road, slamming the driver's side of the car into a streetlight. Carol and Ava could see some sort of struggle happening inside the car, and they both let out huffs of relief when the old man kicked at the door. With a bang, it flew open, and, without a moment to spare, he rolled out onto the street and got to his feet. The girls could see the driver furiously throwing his shoulder against the car door, trying to get out, but the crash had wedged his door shut. The old man turned to run, then quickly changed his mind.
"Why isn't he running?"
whispered Carol anxiously as the girls began scrambling closer, hidden by the shadows in the courtyard. Ava didn't answer. She was completely focused on the events unfolding in front of them. The girls watched, horrified, as the other bad guy began clambering out of the side of the car after the old man. Just as the man gripped the outside of the car's door frame to crawl out, the old man viciously kicked the door closed. The man howled in pain as the door slammed shut on his hand and the window smashed into his face. Lost in the heat of the moment, Ava froze. Carol reached up, grabbing Ava's elbow.
"Get down! They'll see us!"
The old man's eyes locked with Ava's for a moment, and then he turned and raced away.
"Come on,"
whispered Ava urgently.
"Come on!"
Clinging to the shadows, the girls silently followed the old man across the piazza right next to the St. Regis. They watched as he passed by the famous statue of Hercules strangling the Nemean lion, and then disappeared into the shadows down a small alley. The girls stole a last look at the kidnapper's car, and then raced off into the darkness after the old man. A car door slammed behind them as they followed the old man. Carol stole a quick look over her shoulder. She could see one of the men clutching his nose, which seemed to be broken. Carol grabbed Ava's shoulder.
We need to hurry. We've got company."
The girls ran down the narrow alley, passing banks and touristy shops long since closed for the evening. The girls dropped behind a row of mailboxes. They could hear the clattering of the pursuers' shoes clapping against the stone walkway. They would be here in a matter of seconds. The old man skidded to a stop in front of a shop with the sign Libreria Aurora in large blue letters hanging above it.
"Bookstore,"
Carol said under her breath, almost inaudibly. Using his elbow, the old man smashed the glass pane in the door. Ava silently noted to look into the power of the human elbow. They watched as the broken pieces of glass fell to the man's feet. He reached through the opening and twisted his arm to unlock the door. They heard a small tearing sound. He grunted. His jacket had caught on a piece of glass still on the doorframe. He made a quiet grunt of victory, and it swung open as his jacket dislodged. He glanced in the direction of the girls as if he knew they were there, and then he hurried inside the bookstore. Ava was just about to move closer to the store when Carol grabbed her.
"They're here,"
she whispered. Carol pulled Ava back into the shadows, and they flattened their backs against a darkened doorway. Within seconds, the two men rounded the corner and ran down the alleyway, shouting to each other as they looked around. Ava could see streaks of blood on the man's cheeks and chin. The tallest man, who had been driving the car, pointed to the bookstore's door and the smashed glass that reflected in the moonlight on the ground. He said something in gruff Italian, and the other responded in a deep voice, nodding. The tall man held a small black device in his hand. A bright blue electrical charge flashed, making a crackling noise.
"A taser,"
gulped Ava. Carol nodded nervously. The girls watched as the men rushed into the bookstore. They heard more yelling, but it was hard to distinguish between the voices. Suddenly, dozens of crashing sounds came from inside the store. With her heart in her throat, Carol winced as she heard a loud boom, and then another crash. There was more yelling in fast Italian, the three men's voices lashing out. There was another crash, this one setting Ava's teeth on edge. Then a blue flash, a short scream, and finally, silence. The silence was somehow scarier than the noises. One of the men stepped out of the store, his shiny leather shoes too close to the girls for comfort. Carol stared up into his face, his nose twisted to the side, his eyes dark and evil. The man looked up and down the alley. With his face twisted in pain, he took a phone out of his jacket pocket. The old man's kick had done some damage. His fingers were swollen like sausages, and Carol wondered if they were broken. Using his good hand, he quickly dialed a number, brought the phone to his ear, and spoke something in rapid Italian. Carol strained to catch some words, but she couldn't understand a thing. No sooner did he hang up on the call, though, did a black car appear at the mouth of the alley. A loud grunt came from inside the shop. The second man, wearing a suit, came out, dragging the old man. His back was slumped, and his arms hung limp by his side. "Aiutami," the man in the suit said to his counterpart, who went to him and took the old man's other arm. His head lolled forward like his bones were made of jelly.
"He must be unconscious,"
Ava noticed with worry. They began to heave him back to the car, and Ava lifted her head out of the shadows, trying to see more. Eyes filled with concern, she searched for a sign that he was still alive.
"Please let him be okay."
The man's eyes opened a fraction, and an ember of hope flamed in Ava's chest as his eyes met her. He glanced down to his side, and she followed his gaze. With his hand hidden to his captors, she saw his fingers begin to move. They were tiny movements, but Ava knew enough sign language to understand what he was saying. He spelled the word S-I-G-N. She balled her hand into a fist and moved it slowly up and down. Yes. She watched as he quickly moved his fingers. She mouthed the letters as he formed them, committing them to memory. FINDLUCA. With a new sense of urgency, Ava nodded once to the man, his lidded eyes closing, and ducked her head back into the shadows.
"Carol," she whispered, "make sure you get the license plate number of that car."
The girls remained crouched in the doorway until the car sped off into the night. When they were sure the car was gone, they stood, breathing huge sighs of relief.
"That was so crazy,"
Ava breathed.
"You got that right?"
Carol said, shivering. They stood in the shadows together, waiting to feel normal again.
If you're enjoying Thomas Lockhaven's audiobook content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel.